Sportsline Podcast. Certainly appreciate you joining us on the CHCH multimedia platform. I'm Bubba O'Neil. Well, as you know, this podcast is all about the outstanding athletes, coaches, executives, and teams that hail from this region. Today, it's a show of opinion, prediction, and reflection. Recently, there have been a number of issues in the sports world that require discussion, and folks, I invite your thoughts on these topics. Now, no doubt this fella is the perfect person to match wits with. He's no stranger to the Sportsline Podcast. Scott Radley, I thought you were just brilliant to bring in for these kind of things. I know you have a great news and sports background, and a lot of these topics that what's going on in the world right now require that kind of opinion.
Well, that's good. I will hope. We're on the downside of the flu, so the ears are a little plugged. At any moment, there could be a coughing fit. Yeah. We'll see. We're going to try and get those wits fired up, but we're playing a man short today.
Well, I mean, you've had a little break from the Hamilton Spectator and all the things that you do there, but because you've got a little bit of a tan, I remaining there.
Yeah, it's not jaundice. It is a tan. I'm not that sick. Yes,
Where'd you go? Where'd you go this time?
We got down to, believe it or not, Mardi Gras in New Orleans.
Ooh, party time.
Yeah, and then down into the Caribbean. But it was. Have you ever been?
Never.
It was something. So let me just say a few things. It not as wild as I thought. Mm-hmm. I thought, based on reputation, that this was going to be absolute chaos. Mm-hmm. It wasn't. It was. Bourbon Street is loud, and there's a lot of people. I got a ton of beads and didn't have to flash anybody, not once. In fact, that was something that I was kind of surprised by, is that we weren't going and looking, but in the whole time, like, what is the stereotype of how you get beads on Bourbon Street?
For sure.
We saw only two. Mm-hmm. And meanwhile, everybody's getting beads, and it was noisy and it was loud, but it was just a street party. Yeah,
I guess that would take away for some embarrassing moments with your wife in those situations.
You know. So, what do you mean, for me flashing?
Yeah. Well.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. She wasn't about to. I wondered, as we were down there, if that has changed over the years. Because a stereotype comes from somewhere. There's something that makes it. And I wonder if the fact that everybody carries a camera now, if people are now aware that if I do this, I'm probably going to end up on the internet now, and I may be back home a teacher or an accountant or a mother or whatever, and I really don't think this is going to help my life if me doing that is out there. The other thing was, you'll remember that back in January or so, there was a guy who, I think it was a guy, I'm sure it was a guy, who drove his car and crashed through and ran over a bunch of people. So there was military everywhere with machine guns. So maybe that affects things too, because, like you could not have done something stupid there and not had 6 machine gun carrying military personnel on you within 50 steps.
Yeah.
So, it was good. It was an experience. I don't know if we'll go back, but it was an experience, and it'll be something to put on your bucket list.
That's something I got to do at least once there. Let's get you to work here. Canada and the United States, I think these are things that we talk about on a daily basis now. The relations between our two nations are, I would describe them as tepid, maybe. I think that might be the word. Canada dollar is worth about 70 cents right now. Many believe it could get down to about 65. We have teams in Major League Baseball. We have teams in the NBA. Major League Soccer, there's 3 teams. NHL, there are 7 teams that are Canadian-based that get paid on U.S. dollars, is where I'm going with this. Even the 3 teams in the PWHL, they get paid in American dollars. The Canadian Football League, all 9 teams, the players get paid in U.S. funds. How will this sinking dollar hurt these leagues?
Well, we've seen the NHL years ago. Remember, they had for a while there the program where the American teams propped up the Canadian teams when the Canadian dollar was so bad. So we've seen this before. And honestly, if you're an NHL team in the States, I don't know for NHL, I don't know that you really have much of a a reason to complain if that were to happen again, because let's be honest, Canadian NHL teams prop up the league financially in a lot of ways to begin with. So when time comes to pay it back a little, that's fine. But like the Blue Jays, for example, with a huge payroll, because they do have a big payroll. It's not applied properly. They still stink, but they pay a lot of money. Where are they going to find that money? Rogers is not going to accept just losing money. So what's going to happen? You and me. You know what? You're going to go, instead of $17 or whatever it is for a tall boy, it'll be $20. Instead of $12 or $13 for a hot dog or nachos or whatever, it'll be $50. Tickets will go up. Everything will this always falls down to the people. It always falls down to anytime you put some sort of extra cost on the company, it eventually comes down to the people. And so I suspect that leagues are not simply going to allow themselves to bankrupt themselves. They're not going to allow this to run them out of business without trying everything first, which would include raising prices. The leagues, though, that this becomes difficult for, how much can the CFL add to its ticket price and still bring people in? That's, I think, a legitimate question that you're going to have. How much can the PWHL, which is a gate-driven league, just like the CFL, or this new women's soccer league, I don't know how they're paying. Yeah. But you do, if you're one of those ones that's not bringing in money hand over fist, I think you do run a bit of a risk if you start tinkering and start charging people more. There is a chance people say, all right, I'm out.
The amazing thing to me is you point out the fact that ticket prices will increase, and I think you're bang on. I think that's the easy thing to do in many ways. And for the most part, I will say this too, I think the fans are, I'm not going to say dumb, but we tend to suck it up. We complain, but we still show up. Go. Right? So we're kind of suckers in a sense. Where I'm really concerned is what you said there. The smaller leagues, the leagues that are gate-driven, the ones that are developing themselves, the CEBL, the Canadian Premier League, and I know their margins in terms of what they're paying is much smaller. But you look at the CEBL this year, they've instituted for the first time this year a designated player, which means you can go and get somebody, right? A former NBA player or whatever. And I don't think you're paying them you're not paying them $75,000 Canadian, is where I'm really concerned.
Yeah, no, I think I think it should be a legitimate concern if the dollar goes down and then stays there, because look, the dollar's been not great for a number of years. I mean, for most of our lifetime, it seems the dollar's been way below the U.S. There's been moments when it went up, but for most of our lifetime, it's been below, and we've learned to deal with that and handle it. It's when it gets really down that this thing starts to be a problem. So it's a question of how low it goes and how long that lasts. But yeah, some of those leagues. The other part about this, though, is that could there be a benefit? And the weird part about this, it's not to everybody, but let's say you're the Jays and you're bad again, which I fully expect the Jays not to win this year. And so let's say all of a sudden, it's a really expensive day to go to the ballpark, which it is. And let's say things go up even a little bit higher. Is there a chance that some people, the diehards are always going to go, but is there a chance that some people who are just interested in baseball might say, you know what, rather than $200 for a good ticket or whatever it is now and all the food and transit, I'll spend $50 and go to a Hamilton Cardinals game and just try it out. Is there a chance that some of these smaller leagues actually benefit from the fact that many of them may end up being priced out of some of the big league teams? I don't know.
That's a good point, because I think that's what these teams like the Welland Jackfish, the Hamilton Cardinals, the new ownership that's happened in Brantford with the Red Sox. Yeah. I mean, the Red Sox this year, you don't even have to pay for a game. Yeah. Right? The new owner said they're saying it's free. Right? Tariff free.
Do you like that idea? Huh? Do you like that idea?
I couldn't think of anything more inviting to get people to come to the ballpark. Full knowing that other teams around you, that this league has suddenly become kind of cool thing. Toronto, new ownership and kind of cool. Welland, we know about their story with record crowds. Hamilton sort of catching on as well too. If I'm in Brantford, Saturday or Sunday afternoon, and all I got to pay for is the beer?
Yeah, I look, I think it's certainly worth a try. Mm-hmm. My only concern when you do something like this, and I've talked to teams and people who've operated tickets and stuff for teams, is they say, if you charge nothing, in people's mind, it creates in their mind that there is no value to the product. That even if it was a $2 ticket, it means there is some kind of value involved. Now, I'm not saying they shouldn't try it. I think it's worth a go. But the other thing is, if you create a habit, I don't know how Brantford next year, if they decide to, suddenly starts charging, and if you can still bring the people. So I think there is a risk involved. I don't hate the fact that someone is trying it. Mm-hmm. I think it's a little trickier than just saying, doors are open and come drink beer and we're all good. We'll see. It's a really interesting test.
Yeah, it'll be fun to see how this dollar sort of affects it. I mean, we'll go right down the ledger to like Ontario Junior Lacrosse or whatever, which is a fun product. I mean, again, I've said this 1,000 times. If you go to these arenas, a Central Arena in Burlington or whatever, or up on the mountain at the Andrechuk Arena to watch the Bengals or whatever, and you slap down $10, and I'm guaranteeing you, when you walk out of those arenas at the end of the game, you're like, that was really good.
Yeah. Now the risk is overcharging for some of these smaller leagues, mm-hmm. which then does the opposite thing. And then you're saying, I don't know. I've never heard of these guys or these girls. Right. So it is a very, very tricky, fine line to try and walk. And we'll see. I'm going to be really interested to see. Because, I mean, look, if Brantford draws great crowds this year, and then they also are able to spin that, and when people are there, they buy 1 million hot dogs and a ton of beer and a ton of pop, and you say, we made just as much money by not selling tickets and just inviting people in. Maybe for a league like this, you've just created a new template.
All right.
But I just hope at the end of the year that what we don't hear from Brantford is, oh man, we're in financial distress because we lost so much money. Again, I'm not the owner, so it's not my money. So I invite them to try anything to see how these things are going to work. And I touch wood. I hope that this thing really, really works, and I hope they draw a ton of people, and I hope this becomes something that really boosts this league. We're going to see.
A group called Hamilton 100 are looking to host what they've called a pared-down version in their part of the 2030 Commonwealth Games, and it would be in Hamilton and across the region. I want to know your thoughts on this new approach to having a world-class event here in Hamilton.
So this is the new approach. There's been multiple iterations of this, because originally, don't forget, so the British Empire Games started in Hamilton in 1930. That became the Commonwealth Games. The stadium was where Tim Hortons Field, or whatever we call Tim Hortons Field, because that's not the name anymore, is now. And so the idea was, let's have the 100th anniversary games back here. Let's bring it. It started out, let's a big thing. We're going to build up some facilities and blah, blah, blah. And then when that didn't really get traction, because council and other people were saying, well, we don't have money for this. We don't want to be spending all billions of dollars. It's sort of whittled and whittled and whittled. So now the latest that I've heard, the latest idea is no new facilities. We're going to use existing facilities. We can not have to build an athlete's village. We can put them in university dorms and stuff, because it won't just be in Hamilton or even the Hamilton region. We're hoping, we are hoping that this will be in 2 or 3 or 4 provinces simultaneously. So this is going to be a cross-Canada games where there'll be several events here, several events maybe in, I don't know, Saskatchewan, Alberta, PEI, whatever. And that way the costs get just brought way, way, way down to cost almost nothing except for maybe security and travel and things like that. I mean, it's an interesting idea. It's a very, very far removed cousin of its initial self. And again, I go back to what we just said about Brantford and about, okay, if you want to try this and you think that there's a case to be made for this, I don't know that anything like this has ever been done before. The World Cup that's coming up for soccer in 2026 is in the States and Canada. So it's sharing and it's in different cities and such, but I don't know. I don't know how this would work. You'd have to have an opening ceremony somewhere, which means bringing everybody in, presumably. Here's the thing, that ultimately, when you ask the question of what do we think about this, I don't believe that within the city of Hamilton, outside of a few people, and to them, good for them for pushing so hard for this, I don't believe there's an appetite to spend tens or hundreds of millions of dollars on the Commonwealth.
But this is where I think this is their sell point.
I know.
Right?
So I'm saying I don't believe that existed.
Right.
And I still don't believe it exists. So you've now moved to something else.
Right.
Is there an appetite for people to simply watch the Commonwealth Games? And I don't know the answer to that. You're around town. Do you hear people saying, "I'm starving to watch"?
The only time I ever hear about this or talk about this is when a new approach becomes another new approach.
And the interesting twist to this is originally part of the idea here was we need these games to help with resources and facilities. But now if there's no facilities, it is about an event, bringing people here, the economic driver or whatever. But is the Commonwealth... I truly don't know if the Commonwealth Games does that. I don't know, and especially if you've only got a few of the events here, I don't know. You're going to have to convince me that Hamiltonians who were Hamiltonians gung ho about the Pan Am Games in 2015. The soccer was here, and I don't know. You're going to have to convince me that people here are really wanting...
But isn't that the selling point? And this is to the Hamilton 100 group, is that this is going to be an easy sell because we have a beautiful Hamilton Stadium, I guess, Tim Hortons Field or whatever we're calling it. I think it's Hamilton Stadium.
For now.
We have this beautiful facility that really, you could run track here. You could run all the track and field events could happen here.
Rugby sevens.
In St. Catharines, you could actually have rowing, in the sense that Tim Hortons, what do you call it? I don't even know what they're calling First Ontario Center.
Right now it's Hamilton Arena.
Hamilton Arena.
To be named
there
later.
Yeah. To be named later. This is going to be this unbelievable new facility that should be done in completion for this time. That you could house, even the opening ceremonies could be held here in Hamilton.
Theoretically.
Now, I play both sides of the coin here because, one, I kind of agree with some of the taxpayers out there. And I'm like, boy, isn't there a lot of more important things we need to do and focus on in this city than having a games here, especially when they're games that are fractured. I don't know what my appeal is, or actually the Commonwealth staff, like we'll call them that, to say, okay, we're going to have games that are going to have events in Hamilton, St. Catharines, Montreal, Regina.
It's like the athletic version of Live Aid. You're doing it by satellite from around the world.
I don't know if I'm too interested in that.
So for here, the issue would be that you would have to be holding events that you believe you could sell tickets for. And yes, I think that the plan that they have, where they've reduced the capital expenses to get rid of building new facilities and stuff, that makes it palatable, I think. I talked to a few city councilors from the city, and they're like, hey, look, if we don't have to pay, if we're not on the hook for money, the province and the feds are going to basically cover this. We're in for a little bit of policing time or whatever else, but if we really don't have to pay much, and this is no different, for all intents and purposes, from hosting a Grey Cup or a Canadian Open or a Juno Awards, which we've done all three of and benefited from. If it's that, bring it on. If it's just a big event and we're going to have people come to this town and spend their money at restaurants and stay at hotels, and we add to the vibrancy of the city, I'm all for that. Again, I I'm not convinced yet that the Commonwealth Games as an athletic event is a huge seller for people around here, only because, as you just said, I can't remember if I've ever had anybody come up to me, and I mean, I work in sports, people know me, people know you. I've never had anyone say, I am dying to go to a Commonwealth Games. It just has never happened. And maybe it's latent, maybe it's gurgling away under the surface, but I've never heard that. And so maybe if they announce it, that becomes something where people get really, really excited, which I assume, though, Bubba, would also depend upon which events would end up being here. There are sports that probably do better, well, not probably, that definitely would do better in this city than others. Would basketball do well here in the new arena? Yeah, it could. Would badminton do well if you're going to watch Bermuda versus Trinidad and Tobago? I'm not sure.
Hey, don't be picking on Trinidad.
Excuse me. No, I don't know how. I mean, you're going to have to pick the right things that are also going to move the needle. But every other base is going to want those same things.
No doubt. Everyone's going to be fighting for the
soccer,
the prime time events,
track
or
and
whatever.
field.
You know,
Yeah.
I'll ask one more question with this here, and it's funny because you kind of are aligned in this, or at least I kind of see what you're saying. We have the Olympics. That's a grand affair. Everyone talks about it. The hype was amazing. The World Cup is coming. These are well-known events. Yes. I would like to, I actually should have done this before we did this. I would like to canvass my newsroom with the younger reporters and the younger staff here, if they even know what a Commonwealth Games is. And I'm not being ignorant.
Well, I'm sure they've heard of it. I'm sure everybody's heard of it. But I don't know that, like, even for you and I, even for anybody watching right now, name your favorite all-time Commonwealth Games moment.
Joanne Millar.
Okay, so you've got one.
But I would say that because I'm 90 years old.
Okay, no, but you've got one. But I don't know that most people would have it. Now that doesn't mean there couldn't be one if it was held here. It's not, because people don't necessarily know a ton about it, doesn't mean they couldn't know a ton about it. We didn't know. I bet you that if you had polled people prior to 2003 about the World Cycling Championships, they couldn't have told you anything about it.
Right.
And yet many people said that was a great event. I loved going to watch that event. I loved standing at the corner of James and Main when they came ripping down and then all wiped out around the corner. That was always a great spot. There's about an inch of skin left on the road at that corner. So it could become something. It could become something, but I don't know. I don't know. When you say we're bringing the World Cup to Southern Ontario, to me, there is, other than the enormous cost that the province and I think the federal government have paid, like it's hundreds of millions of dollars.
Huge.
But to the local community, there is zero risk that you're going to play a game. And again, I don't care what two teams are in the World Cup. I don't care if it's Qatar and
Côte d'Ivoire.
Funny, that was the exact thing that I was just about to say. Amazing. Excuse me. I mean, I don't care what the teams are. That stadium is going to be full. And it's going to be rocking.
Absolutely.
And it's going to look good for the community. It's going to look good on TV. If you have the Commonwealth Games here and it's not about facilities, but it's just about the party, but people don't join the party, does it look good for us? Does it, or is it a bad look? I don't know. These are tricky things that, again, I understand where they're coming from now. They are trying really hard to find ways that isn't going to cost a lot of money, and I applaud that because I don't think there's an appetite for that right now. But by the games themselves, is that something that people are going to gravitate to? They might. I've just never heard it.
Toronto Maple Leafs have 12 games remaining in their regular season. They are, I would believe, to be a playoff team. They got the Philadelphia Flyers tonight if you're watching live tonight. But at the end of the day, we're boiling down to the end of the season. And there seems to be a looming question that has really developed. I thought there was really an easy answer to this maybe 2 months ago. Now I'm not quite sure. The goaltending situation stands like this. Anthony Stollar's unbelievable in the early part of the season. gets injured. Joseph Wall picks up and has been very steady and winning 24 games at that as well too. So, but you have there are a lot of people that believe Stolarz, in numbers wise, save percentage, is the better goaltender. So you're Craig Berube. Game one, whoever you're playing, is it Stolarz, Wall, or a tandem that you're riding?
I think because you've got two guys that have neither one has embarrassed himself and neither one has pulled away as decidedly better. They've both been good. They've both been very good this year. I think most Leaf fans would be quite delighted, especially coming into this year. There was a million questions. Remember, there was all kinds of talk. Should the Leafs trade for UC Soros?
Yeah, for sure.
So I think Leaf fans should be delighted with how well generally these guys have played. Because of that, I really believe wholeheartedly, and I've said this many, many, many times, the Stanley Cup playoffs oftentimes now aren't decided. Goaltending is such an integral part of it, but it's not always who's the best goalie, it's who's the hottest goalie. I wait till the last week, and whoever is the guy who looks hotter, you just go with him until he's not, and then you go to the other guy, and I think you can do that with this team. I think you can easily swap back and forth, and if one guy has a stinker, you go to the other guy. If one guy is hot, runs 3 or 4 or 5 games in a row, and he's just lights out, you stick with that guy. What have you got to lose? It's not like you're talking where, back in 1974 and it's Ken Dryden or Bunny LaRock. You've got two guys who are essentially the same thing.
Do you think Berube's thinking that way? He's an old school kind of guy, and I would say to you that for whatever reason, and there really is no reason for this, even the Boston Bruins a couple of years ago, who had Ullmark, who would come off winning a Vezina Trophy,
yep,
and Swayman, who would really step forward. They were even, Steven, very much like what we're seeing here. But when it came to the playoffs, he rode Ullmark for 6 games, and then, because he felt desperate, went to Swayman for 7. So his mentality, the coach's mentality changed. And I see this a lot of times in the National Hockey League, that they feel you've got to ride a hot goaltender, or I'm picking one guy and sticking with him.
Yeah.
Even sorry, just on a real short basis there, what Cooper did in riding Binnington, when they looked at like every opportunity to make a change to Aiden Hill or Montembeault, it just seemed to be that he's like, no, stubborn, I'm riding this guy.
So yeah, there is I think that it's one thing that coaches don't want to have to think about, quite honestly. I think they would love to just say, I got a goalie who's stopping everything. That's one problem. I can deal with my lines and my power play and penalty kill. Goalie is out of sight, out of mind. He's just doing it. So, yeah, they would love to have just one guy play every game of the playoffs, because that means he's probably doing pretty well. I remember, years ago here in Hamilton, 2007, when Carey Price came in for the Bulldogs in the Calder Cup playoffs. He played all but 2 periods of those playoffs. And what was his name? Jan Denis.
Jan Denis played the whole season.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden Price comes in, and Carey Price had one stinker of a period. They put Denis in and put Price right back in, and then he never faltered again. That's ideally what you have if you're a coach, because it's just less to have to worry about. So no, I think that he probably... It's a difficult spot. It really is, because they're so even that if you pick one guy and he gets hot for you, you look like a genius. But if you pick the same guy and he has a stinker of a game, you go, why didn't you take the other guy? And if you put the other guy in and he then has a stinker of a game, you're like, you're doing it all wrong. And yet I don't know that there's a right or a wrong answer. I mean, again, the difference between these two goalies is small. And so you're flipping a coin and you're hoping that the guy that it lands on shows up and plays really well, and then everything is just fine.
No Switzerland. Who you start? I know there's still 12 games left, which is, still probably 3 weeks. But who do you like?
Stolarz is the guy that I lean to for one really simple reason, and not because he's better. He's just bigger. And bigger by physics. Even if he doesn't play as well, he takes up more of the net. And so there's a chance that a puck hits him that doesn't hit Wall. But it's like, it's such a small thing. If Berube said, I'm going Wall, I wouldn't say, oh, you're a fool. It's either could work. The bigger thing for the Leafs, I think, is not even the goaltending. It's, we keep having this talk about how, they got to go for top spot in the Atlantic. They got to win top spot in the Atlantic. I'm sorry. I'm one of the few people who's saying if you're the Leafs, do not pass Florida for top spot in the Atlantic.
Why?
I think the Leafs can beat Tampa Bay. They've beaten Tampa Bay, and I think Tampa Bay is not the team they were once upon a time. They're still good, but I think you can beat Tampa Bay. I'm not positive that the way that Ottawa plays, for example, the Leafs beat Ottawa in a
Come on!
They haven't beaten them yet this year. They always look bad against them. Ottawa always exposes them because they play a different style that doesn't work well for the Leafs. And they've got Ullmark, who can be a lights out. Now, Tampa has Vasilevsky, I understand.
Yep. But
it's not like, my point is, I think that the Tampa roster lines up better for the Leafs to have success against. And here's one other thing, and this is for a Leaf fan. If you lose to Tampa again, it hurts. I mean, it's like that would be a million times in the last, like you'd be upset and you'd want the whole thing to be burned to the ground and all the rest of the stuff. It would hurt. If you were to lose to Ottawa or Montreal in the first round of the playoffs, two teams that haven't even sniffed the playoffs in a long time, that would be crushing. That would be soul eviscerating. You couldn't go to work the next day if you were to lose to Ottawa or Montreal. And so you say, well, what are you saying? There's no confidence in the Leafs? Really, no. What's the reason to have, if you're a Leaf fan, what would be the reason you have confidence in the Leafs in the playoffs? They've given you nothing. One playoff series win in 20 years.
No, be fair here. This is the way this team has been built compared to what Dubas has done. It's a different team. It lines up differently. There's different expectations. I think they're a better hitting team. I think with guys like Tanev, they're a much better defensive.
I agree.
I mean, McCabe is good. I know people are going to hop all over Morgan Riley, but he does his job when, paired up with the right guy, I believe. I think they're a better team. I think their goal defense is, you got to have good defense and you have to have good goaltending in the playoffs. And I think they are. I'm not saying they're going to the cup. I think they're better. They're better fit for the playoffs.
But the core of this team is the same, and it is incredibly fragile come playoff time. They can look like the best regular season team, and they often do. And yet we know what their history is, this group. We know Austin Matthews, great player, but in big games, there is no history of him winning. Whether it's the NHL or whether it's Four Nations Cup, Austin Matthews has just not been able to be part of a team that wins in big moments. Is that his fault? I don't know. He's part of it. I don't put the whole blame on him. But if you're a Leaf fan, I think you live in absolute fear. You live in some sort of consternation of losing against Tampa again. You live in absolute fear of losing to Ottawa or Montreal. And they've done it. In the bubble, they lost to Montreal, a team they should have easily beat.
Easily.
They lost to Columbus. They've shown they can lose to teams that are that are just shadows of them. They've done it many times. You could not be a Leaf fan and survive the spring if they lost to Ottawa or Montreal.
Could you imagine the noise in the nation's capital? Again, a much smaller fan base. Man we know very well, and Michael Andlauer, who has consistently pointed out the fact of being being annoyed with being anointed the label of being Ontario's other team.
Yeah.
If that were to ever happen.
Oh, it would be. Well, the noise there. What would be? So Brendan Shanahan doesn't have a contract after this year.
They've been showing him a lot these days.
You lose to Ottawa or Montreal. You lose to anybody, but especially them.
Done.
He may not even last till the end of the third period of the final game. He may be cleaned out and escorted out by security before the final game is over. And you got guys, Mitch Marner, the anger. I don't care.
He's been good.
I know. Well, he hasn't been good lately. He's had a good year, but he's cooled off since Four Nations Cup. But if Mitch Marner didn't have a fantastic playoffs, if he did not have a fantastic playoffs and they lost to one of those two teams, fans would be saying, don't even offer him a contract. Get him out the door. Let's save the money and use it on use the salary cap money.
Be careful what you wish for.
I understand, but I'm just saying the outrage would be a lot if they lose to Tampa. And I keep saying Tampa because that seems like the only other team that there's a chance of playing. It's either them or you go to the wild card teams. You lose to Tampa, people are ticked off and they're mad and all the rest, and it's just another year.
Seen it before.
Yeah, it's just another year. They're saying we can't beat Boston. We beat Tampa once, but that's it. But you lose to Ottawa or Montreal, and it is full-on apocalyptic. You disagree?
Yeah, well, I think of the people here that are Habs and Sens fans and the delight that they would have walking into work on a Monday if this were to end on a weekend and that the Leafs were to lose a series on a weekend. The delight.
And those teams in a playoffs, even though they're in the playoffs and you want to do well, they're playing with house money. They got nothing to lose. The Leafs have everything to lose.
They do.
The Leafs have, so all the pressure. You can't, I know the Brewman go, well, the pressure's on them. Look, they have to, blah, 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 blah. No. Every bit of the pressure would be on the Leafs. It always is going to be anyway. Every bit of the pressure would be on the Leafs. The Habs, the Sens would be relaxed. They'd be going out there. They'd be fired up. And if the first bad thing happens to Toronto, I'm sorry. Recent history would say, look out, because this suddenly could be a big problem. And again, Toronto's done okay against Montreal this year, memory serves, but they have not done anything against Ottawa, and they've shown no evidence they can beat that team in a regular season game, let alone in a playoff.
And they've done it in different ways. They've done it in tight games. They've skunked them. It's been incredible to see what the Sens have done. Blue Jays, how promising is this? They win the Grapefruit League record title with an 18-10 record. They were very good, hitting the ball out of the park. Their high-end pitchers and starters were real good. Do you have maybe a change optimism going into 2025? We're days away.
So I read somewhere, someone called it they won the Golden Grapefruit, which I love. That's a good one. There should be a trophy with that, a Golden Grapefruit trophy. No. You are old enough, I'm old enough to remember back in 1988, 87. Yep. Remember Sil Campusano? He beat out Lloyd Mosby an aging Lloyd Mosby. He beat him out for the starting center field because he was tearing the hide off the ball. And then about a year before that, Rob Ducey hit like 430 in spring training. He was the spring training Ted Williams. And there have been other guys who have done this. And then you get 3 weeks into the season and Rob Ducey has one single in 70 at-bats and he's down in AAA.
Give him time.
And Sil Campusano is, who knows where he is. I put almost zero on spring training. You show me what you're going to do when the season starts. And so, you'd
rather win than lose.
I'd rather work on stuff and know that the things that I'm working on are having an effect, because don't forget, you're taking guys out early, you're putting other guys in. Wins and losses are largely irrelevant in spring training, but I want to know that, so Max Scherzer, for example, I want to know that this guy, can he pitch with this sore thumb that he's got? That's the kind of stuff out of spring training I want to know about. And if Max Scherzer lost a game 2-1, but looked great, is that really a loss? I mean, I suppose there's other things that you're gauging this on. So we'll see. We'll see. I remain, I hate to say it, I remain overwhelmingly pessimistic about this team. I think they have no chance of doing anything of value in the regular season. I think they're going to finish 4th or 5th in the AL East, and nothing will happen. And and they'll and then you get into the whole Vladimir Guerrero thing. What do you do with him? And that is gonna, if they don't sign him before the season, this now becomes this thing that drags on. And no one's talking about, well, do you sign Bo Bichette because he's in the same position?
I'm telling you, Bo Bichette's going to have a great year. Bichette is a good hitter who had an off year. He's proven to be a good hitter. He's a guy that could and has done before lead the American League in hits. I think he's that talented of a hitter.
So now you end up with another fiasco that the management of the Blue Jays have created. Let's say that your suggestion there comes true. Let's say Bo Bichette has another great year. You've just reportedly offered over $500 million to Vladimir Guerrero. And let's say Bichette plays better than him. He's won more batting titles than Vlad Guerrero. Are you going to say to Bichette, yeah, we'll offer you 200?
No.
Bichette's going to want close, if not exactly the same, which means you're not going to be. So now what are you going to do? Say to Bichette, I'm sorry, no, because we can't tie up $1 billion in 2 players. Rogers is, I find it hard to believe Rogers is going to go for that. And so what? So now, what if Guerrero is mediocre and Bichette is great? And Bichette wants Guerrero money, but you're worried about Guerrero walking out. You could make such a hash of this whole thing because you haven't signed these guys years ago when you should have.
Look, Laura, can you pull up the starting line? Let's look at this lineup here. Like, I'm not joking here. Like, I don't know how the manager's going to line this up, but let's just say he has the likes of a Bo Bichette leading off, Guerrero number 2, Santander 3-hole, Dalton Varsho hitting cleanup. That's pretty good. I mean, and I only put Varsho there because he can go for power. Like, there's not a lot of teams in Major League Baseball that could offer 4 batters like that.
So if I was looking at that lineup and it was as you described, I would like to believe that I would have confidence in Bichette, although last year was not indicative of that. But I would like to believe that he'll bounce back. And then if you get second half of the year Vladimir Guerrero, that's pretty good. Santander, what do you have, 45 homers? Is that what they signed him on last year?
He's not going to hit 45.
He's not going to hit 45 homers. Let's say he gets 30.
30, right? 35.
Okay, 30, you're doing okay. Varsho, great defender.
Yes.
Literally hit and miss with the bat. Strikeout.
Always been.
Or big shot. And after that, you're into some, like, George Springer, I don't know what that guy's got left. Alexander Kirk, they just signed to a new deal. That guy is like throwing a pan of bacon grease down the drain pipe. Like, he clogs everything up so badly. You can't even hit him ninth now, though, because if he gets on base and Bichette is behind him and hits a double or a triple, he can't get around the bases.
But you know what? But looking at him as an all-around player, he's certainly done better than I think any of us expected.
Yes.
His defensive metrics are way up over the last couple of years. He's developed into a really good player. His hitting has been okay. It's been okay. He's certainly better than a lot of catchers in the league that are sitting around 175, the Mendoza line.
Agreed.
He can hit, and he can hit for power. And this Alan Roden guy, that for the last 2, when we've talked about the development of any prospects, they've been talking about this guy for 2 years, and they must have kept him with the team this year for a reason. And he actually had a really good spring. And if he can start out hot, I just get a feeling that if the Blue Jays can kind of take some of this grapefruit league feeling,
juice,
the
grapefruit juice,
and if they can get off to a good start, it could enthuse us.
Okay, sure. I just over 162 games, I don't see this as a roster that is going to compete with the Red Sox. The Yankees have injuries for sure, but I think they're still a way better team. Baltimore lost some guys, but I still think Baltimore is not only a better roster, but a younger roster with better players. And Tampa has had a year or 2 that hasn't been great, but Tampa always seems to find a way to bounce back quickly, and all of a sudden you'll have 3 guys come out of nowhere that no one's heard of, and they're suddenly stars, and they're, a year later they're trading them, but nonetheless, for that time they were great. So, no, I hope I'm wrong. But again, we've been talking about history and track record, and I don't see. I mean, George Springer. Should we hope that George Springer is going to have this big rebound and become a great player again? Defensively he's still fine, but he doesn't look good up at bat. I just don't know where we're getting a lot of optimism from this team. And any injuries, and injuries happen in baseball.
Right.
They are so thin that any injuries, you're in big trouble. You're in big trouble with this team.
They may not be the most. I think there might be a lot of leaning on Ernie Clement to be playing multiple positions. If we can put up the other pitching board. By the way,
what happened? Just one more thing about that lineup. What happened? Didn't they make that huge trade with Cleveland this offseason? Didn't they bring in the guy that was supposed to be the guy that was going to turn the whole thing around? He's not even on your roster.
No. If we can just bring in the pitching staff.
There you go. See, he doesn't even exist on there.
This pitching staff is, which again, I think Barrios is a gamer. Gosman, I think, is a workhorse. I think he's going to have a better year than last year. You know, you keep thinking Chris Bassett is too old, but then he keeps just being pretty steady. Yeah, there's question marks about Scherzer. Bowden Francis has shown great moments and also shown moments that he's a kid. I worry about the bullpen a little bit with Hoffman and Garcia. The weird thing to me is you look at that entire pitching staff out of the bullpen and the starting staff. What's missing?
Okay.
One left-hander. There's no left-handers.
So you've also got, and again, track record. It was, 2 years ago that Barrios couldn't get you or I out. So you hope that the Barrios who shows up this year is the guy who looks like more like last year than the year before. Because if he goes back to being that guy that's out after every first inning, you got problems. Max Scherzer, you hope that his thumb is not a thing that suddenly puts him on the DL.
He's going to be on the DL at some point.
Sure he will. But you hope it's not a thing where it's
41
over
years
and over
old.
and over again. Gosman was fantastic when he first arrived in Toronto. I don't think he's quite the same guy that he was. Francis, you're right, young guy, so you hope that, that becomes something. Bassett, to me, is the most reliable guy out there. Bassett's the guy that I would have he's like, what was his name? Who was the change-up guy in 2015 the Jays had? They threw him out there, the starter. He pitched the Game 5 against Texas in the bat flip
Ross
game.
Stripling?
No, not Stripling. He was the guy who always threw the great change-up all the time. I can't think of his name right now. And for a while there, you're like, okay, he's like, doesn't throw hard. I'll think of his name in a minute. Doesn't throw hard. Isn't like the star pitcher, but that's the guy that you put him out there. I'm confident they're going to.
Oh, Estrada?
Marco Estrada.
Marco Estrada.
Yeah, that was the guy for that period of time. You're like, okay, that guy I have real faith in that he's going to. It didn't last long.
Yeah.
But for several months in that run, he was amazing. That's what I look at Bassett right now. I was like, I'll take Bassett over. Because Scherzer could be hurt. Gosman, I don't know. And Barrios could be great or could be not so much. You don't know.
All right, so much. I mean, again, we're closing on this season. I'm sure you and I will be talking about the Jays for some time. I know it's amazing to think that the season is starting and that all that drama, along with the Leaf drama, is going to be fulfilling us for the next couple of months. Maybe Leafs for a couple of months at least. On Friday, George Foreman, the heavyweight champion of the world, two-time heavyweight champion of the world, and the man with the grill, the guy that had seemingly not only multiple careers but multiple personalities in the way he presented himself to us and the way we appreciated him, passes away at the age of 76. It made me think that, wow, maybe the greatest era of at least the heavyweight division, they're all gone. And I think about the rivalries that were in between Muhammad Ali, George Foreman, Joe Frazier, and Ken Norton. I'm finding it hard to pick an era that had better rivalries than what these four men produced.
No kidding. And you could put in there just loosely at the end, Larry Holmes and Trevor Berbick, who were just at the end of that. And at the time, I mean, we remember them, both those guys getting destroyed by Mike Tyson, looking old and slow. But at their time, they were great fighters.
Yeah, just as Norton kind of went away. I mean, that's when Larry Holmes became the champion.
Yeah. No, it's an amazing funny thing when you said that. So Foreman died at 76. He finished with 76 wins. I thought he was 76 when he fought Moorer. Right? Didn't he seem like that? He was 40s.
Yeah, he's 45 years old, and
but he
won a
felt
championship.
like he was 76. And the way the way he was talked about, old George Foreman. It's like I'm now like way older than he was, and it's like, okay. I mean, we just saw Mike Tyson.
Yeah, but you didn't step in the ring.
Well, I know.
Against a much younger man at 45.
We saw Mike Tyson though. The other month,
and that was horrible, right? That was 56 years old. Come on.
I still question whether Mike Tyson was really trying to fight in that fight, or if there was. There were a few times you thought, okay, just let him go and see what happens. But anyway, that's a different discussion. But no, George Foreman, like he was one of the amazing things about George Foreman, besides his fighting. What other athlete reshaped their perception in the public eye? Because he was the bad guy. He was the
bad guy, the heel.
He was the heel. He was, Ali, Boombaye, I don't even remember what that meant. But
kill him,
right?
Ali, kill him. Yeah.
In the Rumble in the Jungle. And Ali was the beloved guy, and Foreman was the anti-hero. Not even an anti-hero. You're right. He's the villain.
He was a villain. People thought he'd just kill people. And he enjoyed that. He enjoyed that type of intimidation.
He did until that Rumble in the Jungle. And
Yes.
there's stories about that where he suddenly... I remember reading about this or watching or something about this where he's like, wait a second, how did I become it's almost a racist thing. And it's like, we're two African-American men fighting in Africa, and suddenly I'm like,
Yep.
It got to be a very complicated storyline. And wasn't it that fight where Ali presented him with the plastic gorilla?
No, that was the Thriller in Manila.
Was that the Thriller in Manila?
The Thriller in Manila.
All right, but again, it was the same thing. But
Ali crafted that with us in a similar situation.
It was almost a racist.
In their first fight in '71, that was the thing. That Ali, who was coming off, being accused as a draft dodger, not going to fight in Vietnam. He was seen as the people's champion for blacks, and Joe Frazier was seen as the people's champion for the general white boxing community.
Yeah, these are such complicated things when you have two African-American men and somehow it becomes a racial thing, but it did at the time. And Foreman was the bad guy somehow, and yet, as whether it's with the grill or whether it's, I don't know any other human that's had 5 kids and named them all after himself. That's still, you call all your kids George. That's delightful. But whatever it was, he figured it out, and he became the guy who now was this cuddly giant teddy bear that when he knocked out Moore, was it Michael Moore?
Michael Moore.
Yeah.
Yep.
When he knocked him out, people loved it. They loved the fact that he was now the conquering hero.
I'll even go a couple of years prior, because when because remember he had retired, and you're right, because the Thriller in Manila thing, it damaged him psychologically for all the reasons that you talked about. He was a heel. People didn't like him. He was this mean-spirited man. Ali, who couldn't have liked Ali because of his charisma? But then with Foreman, he quits boxing, says he saw God, becomes a preacher, then says, according to him, God said you need to go box again, right? And at the plus years of 40, starts to retrain and gets in the ring again. But to your point there, if you remember, I think it was a year or two prior to beating Moore, he had fought Holyfield for the and got beat up pretty good, and could have quit then. But it's just such a crazy story. And then you throw in the grill. Whatever he made in boxing, the millions of dollars that he made in boxing, probably pale in comparison to what he made with that low-fat grill. The craziest thing.
Well, and that
I had 2 of them.
Did you really?
Didn't work.
I always just think, every time this is so stupid. Every time I think of the George Foreman grill now, I think of that episode of The Office where Michael Scott burns his foot on the George Foreman grill because he likes to wake up with sizzling bacon in bed. That's right. How George Foreman. But go back to that. I don't know if you can, that graphic of those 4 guys from that era, because it's like you look at those guys with the money that they made, and they all did reasonably. They did very well for their time. Imagine now when you've got Floyd Mayweather making $100 million a fight or whatever. What would these guys, if you had an Ali Foreman or an Ali Frazier or a whatever, those guys now with the money and TV and paper, they'd be talking about $100 million, $150 million each for each of these fights. They would have been. First of all, I don't believe they would have become what they were as far as rivals, because I think money makes you comfortable. And you have 1 or 2 of those fights, and some of those guys are going to start getting fat. And I don't necessarily mean physically fat. I mean, they're going to just I'm good. They all were hungry. Again, not literally. They were hungry right through their careers, always.
Laura, can we just throw up one board here for me, the second boxing board there? And here's what is so interesting to me, and where I talk about the rivalry aspect of this, is the fact that when in sports have we ever seen anything like this? Like Fraser fights Ali and loses. Like Foreman fights Fraser and then gets destroyed, gets knocked down 6 times in 2 innings. The fact that these guys coexisted all within each other, this incredible culture of these 4 men that all, for as amazing as Ali was in his career, struggled in 3 fights against Norton. Some saying that he lost one. And he did lose one, actually.
I don't know that there's been a better foursome. Like, you could have had tournaments, like every like 2 years have heavyweight championship tournament to do this. I mean, that's not how it works. But the only rivalry in boxing, and I know some people will throw other ones out there, but the one was. Who were the 2 guys who had the trilogy, the middleweights or the welterweights? Mickey Gatti, Mickey Ward, and
Arturo
Gatti.
Yes.
And if you watch those 3 fights, you go, okay, those may have been the 3 best rivalry fights. They were 3 of the best fights ever, period. But as far as having 4 guys, like, you don't have Irish Mickey Ward and Arturo Gatti and Bob Smith and Stephen Jones, who are all in it and they're taking on each other, and every one of these fights is great. These guys, you could mix any one of the 4 into a pair and say, go at it, and it was going to be a great fight.
Amazing stuff. Amazing era. And like I said, to your point, the 4 guys existed, but then there was also others.
There were others.
Ernie Shavers and, as you said, Larry Holmes.
Spinks.
Leon Spinks comes in there, and he makes his mark in there. Yep. You could just go on and on. Jerry Quarry fought every one of those guys. George Chuvalo, our own Canadian, maybe the greatest Canadian boxer of all time, fought every one of those men. Every one of those men, and never got knocked out.
Yeah, I am still convinced. I've met him. I've talked to him. George Chuvalo. I am convinced that his head is a cinder block.
Oh, it had to have been.
There is no. His head, his skull has to be 3 inches thick because that is the toughest guy. Honestly,
so tough.
If you had a contest for the toughest Canadian of all time, he gets my vote every time. I don't care. Terry Fox is there. In a different way.
Yes, for sure.
In a different way. But as far as if you physically toughest guy, George Chuvalo, it's hard to argue that anybody was a harder, tougher guy than he was, just because of what he went through. And you're right, never got knocked down. It's unbelievable.
Never got knocked down. And people talk about his toughness. I think the only thing I can think about in terms of that kind of rivalry, I can kind of think about the middleweights, how they kind of took over a little bit there. And you had that kind of trilogy going on between Hearns, Hagler, Duran, and Leonard, I guess.
Welterweights, yeah.
They were welterweights and heavy and middleweights at the kind of as they got older, they continued to fight. But yeah, there was something special about that. And the best part about all that stuff there, again, for people like old folks like us, so many of those fights were on regular TV.
Oh yeah, Wide World of Sports.
Wide World of Sports.
And here, we talked about this one of the last times I was on, but back in October, we were down in Louisville. Muhammad Ali's house, I think, is still for sale. You've still got a chance to buy it. Yeah, it's still his childhood home is still for sale.
I mean, maybe one day. Hey, it's been great chatting with you here. Great topics. Again, these Leafs, I'm really concerned about. The Blue Jays, I think we'll be talking about this somewhere along the line as well too. But again, I think what we're talking about these Commonwealth Games things here in Hamilton, I'm so intrigued, and I'm actually, and I still don't know. I kind of want it, and kind of don't know why we even want it here. So I don't know. We'll find out.
Maybe there is this, as I say, this big undercurrent ready to explode that I really, really am excited about this once we hear about it and get going. I mean, look, I always remember, I know you got to run. I always remember back in 2010 that leading into the Vancouver Olympics, there was a lot of people saying, oh, there's not that much excitement. Where people are just sort of sour about the games, and there's been all this construction and no snow. And there was a lot of sort of pessimism around those games until that Olympic torch arrived by the relay, and they lit it, and immediately it went, and everything was amazing. Everything. And now, I give a ton of credit on that one to CTV and their coverage and the way they did that. And as much as I think we all never want to hear that song again, that I Believe song, that song, it was this but it was this thing that tied it all together. And like, they told a great story, and Canadians completely bought in, and the red mittens, everything went perfect.
Dude drinking beer on the set.
Montgomery. But no, it's so it's a thing where you may not have the huge excitement until it arrives and everyone's into it. I don't know where that's going to come from, and I think it would depend hugely on what sports were here and how you can get people. I don't know, but we're going to see. I mean, it's certainly no sure thing still, but we'll see.
Stay tuned, folks.
Stay tuned.
Thanks for joining us, partner. That's your Sportsline podcast for the day, and you've just seen and heard we love talking sports. If you do know of an athlete, team, or event to promote, the Sportsline podcast do want to hear from you. Please, I implore you, please hit the thumbs up, like, and subscribe button, and if you have something to say, we always appreciate your comments. For the wonderful people that make the Sportsline podcast possible, thank you so very much. We'll see you tomorrow, folks.